the view taken by the Supreme Court recently, I think that was, excessive. They made a mistake. NCERT has apologized. So therefore, the matter should, have rested there. The mention of corruption in the judiciary forms that part. To remove the entire chapter really doesn't make any sense. This is another aspect of it. Should children of an impressionable age, should they be told that corruption is all pervasive in the judiciary? They can certainly be told that, there are instances of corruption. That impression is being backed up by a statement given by a former Chief Justice of India. That if the former Chief Justice of India says there is corruption in the judiciary, then it must be corruption in the judiciary. My view is that judicial overreach is to the action that has been taken. When you say that 20% of the judiciary is corrupt, you could perhaps pick up some judges, but you could certainly pick up some people from the registry. There have been transfers of some judges because of, suspicions of misconduct. It does give the impression that all is not well. The time has come for the judiciary to introspect. You have a judge who delivered a particular judgment and is appointed the governor of a state. Is that a coincidence? You have a Chief Justice who gave a judgment in favor of the government and was nominated to the Rajya Sabha.
Hello and welcome to HC's weekly talk show, The Interview. Caesar's wife should not only be above suspicion, but should also appear to be above suspicion. This would apply best to the judiciary than any other institution in this country. Recently, a textbook carried a chapter on corruption in the judiciary. The Supreme Court cracked the whip and called it a calculated move and a deeper conspiracy to malign the judiciary. What followed was an attempted course correction, an apology, and of course a controversy. It also threw up many questions. Is the judiciary accountable? Shouldn't textbooks state things as they are? Should issues like corruption be brushed aside? And just because it is the judiciary, is it above scrutiny? Who better to discuss this than someone from within the judicial system? Justice Madan Lokur, who is all for exposure and transparency. A former judge of the Supreme Court, Justice Lokur is former Chief Justice of the High Courts of Andhra Pradesh and Guwahati. Justice Lokur here with us in this edition of The Interview. Welcome to the show, Justice Lokur, and thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me begin with what is top of the mind and making news. The NCERT versus the judiciary. What is your take?
Yes, I think the controversy has really blown up.
And brought the issue into focus?
In one sense. What has aggravated the situation, so to say, is the view taken by the Supreme Court recently to say that the persons who had written the chapter, 3 persons who had written the chapter, should not be associated in future with any
public funded
organization. I think that was excessive. They made a mistake. NCERT has apologized. I think these people have also apologized, and so therefore the matter should have rested there, unless the Supreme Court felt that the apology was just somewhat padding up kind of thing. If it was not a genuine apology, then of course matters can be taken further. Even in matters of contempt of court, for example, If a person alleged to have committed contempt of court apologizes and is genuine in his apology, the court does not, take the matter further. So in this case as well, I think after the apology had been tendered,
And also to rewrite the chapter.
and also to rewrite the chapter, taking out the portion which is, offensive, I think the matter should have come to a close.
So, would you see this as, some say, judicial overreach, and in one sense, and I'm using a strong word here, dictatorship of the judiciary?
I'm not too sure whether these words are appropriate, in the sense that, to say that these people should not be associated with any public funded organization, where does that come from? I mean, that can perhaps be described as overreach, but there is no law which says that you can blacklist somebody. I mean, this is effectively blacklisting, that you can effectively blacklist somebody forever from participating in any public funded organization or writing for any public funded organization. That is clearly excessive. I mean, nobody gets blacklisted for life, right? The Supreme Court has, said that, all right, if these people are not happy with what we have said, then they can always approach us. But they might turn around and say, listen, we don't care. Why should we approach you? If you have done something which you should not have done, why should we come and tell you that, listen, you should not have done that? Dictatorship is, I think, a little strong, but overreach could perhaps be accepted.
In fact, you yourself have opposed the move to remove the chapter.
Yes. Yeah. The chapter is about 18 pages about the judiciary, right? And there is a small section towards the end of the chapter which talks about challenges that are being faced by the judiciary. And the mention of corruption in the judiciary forms that part. So, if there is an objection to corruption in the judiciary and the way it is worded and so on, we can come to that. To remove the entire chapter really doesn't make any sense. Worse comes to worse, that small portion or a part of that small portion could have been deleted, and there does not seem to be any objection to the rest of the chapter. So there is no point in, removing the rest of the chapter.
What is the basis of even removing corruption in the judiciary? Because one is not saying the judiciary is corrupt. One is talking about a challenge of corruption in the judiciary, which is not the same thing.
Yeah. You see, there are two things, there are two ways of looking at this problem. One, if I remember correctly, it says challenges faced by the judiciary. Now, one challenge that has been mentioned is the huge pendency of cases. All right, there's no doubt about that. A very, very large number, running into millions of cases, are pending. The second challenge that has been mentioned is the vacancies in the judicial posts, vacancies at the High Court level, vacancies at the District Court level. That's a challenge, no doubt about it. The third challenge is said to be corruption in the judiciary. It gives an impression that corruption is all pervasive. You go to a court and you'll find corruption. You go to some other court, you will find corruption. Now, first of all, I don't think there's any evidence for that. And even otherwise, there is nothing to suggest that every court in the country is corrupt, right? So, to frame that as a challenge, which is an all-pervasive challenge, is, I think, what the Supreme Court has objected to. That is one aspect.
Do you agree to that objection?
Yes, because it is not all pervasive. I mean, there are instances of corruption, certainly. But to say that the entire judiciary is corrupt is, I think, going a little too far. The second aspect is, and which the Supreme Court has also mentioned, is the fact that it is for class 8 students. It's a part of a textbook for the class 8 students.
Impressionable minds.
Impressionable minds, that's the expression that they have used. This is another aspect of it. Should children of an impressionable age, should they be told that corruption is all pervasive in the judiciary? I don't think so. They can certainly be told that, there are instances of corruption. Okay. Why say that the entire judiciary, paint the entire judiciary in the same brush and say, well, corruption is all pervasive?
I don't think that is what is being said.
Yeah.
It is said that one of the challenges is corruption.
Correct.
Full stop.
Correct.
It doesn't say all pervasive, that's an interpretation.
Yeah.
So, and a view.
Yeah.
So, somewhere, it's a gray area.
Yeah, but that's the impression that is being given. And that impression is being backed up by a statement given by a former Chief Justice of India. They have said in the textbook that a former Chief Justice of India, Justice Gavai, had said about corruption in the judiciary, right? So you say that, well, a Chief Justice of India has said there's corruption in the judiciary, so therefore there must be corruption in the judiciary. Yes, there is corruption in the judiciary. But that doesn't mean, and it can be qualified, which I think should have been done, it doesn't mean that everybody in the judiciary is corrupt. It just means that there is corruption in the judiciary. So, to put it in that context now, the large pendency of cases running into millions is an all-pervasive problem. It's not a problem in one court. It's all pervasive. Vacancies, it's all pervasive. And you read corruption as one of the challenges, the impression that can be given, I'm not saying it is given, but the impression that can be given is that it's all pervasive.
So, as you said, impression and not conclusion.
Yeah.
So, then don't you think it is judicial overreach? And I will not use the word dictatorship, but I will say judicial overreach.
No, the judicial overreach is not to the content, It's my view is the judicial overreach is to the action that has been taken.
The action, yes, judicial overreach, but to the content also. Don't you think it is overreach? It's just oversensitivity.
Yeah, well,
That because it is judiciary, you cannot say anything about it.
No. I would not go that far.
Okay.
Okay, I would not go that far. Like I said, the impression given is it's all pervasive. If that is the impression given, and that is the impression that people can carry, particularly for impressionable minds, all right, then it has to be corrected. And the way to correct it is to say that, well, either you delete this or you clarify it. If that is done, it's perfectly okay.
During the hearing, the Supreme Court said, and I'm quoting, it seems there is a calculated move to undermine the institution and demean the dignity of the judiciary. If allowed to go unchecked, this will erode people's faith in the judiciary. Does faith in the judiciary mean a complete whitewash or turning a blind eye to the issues that exist?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, certainly. I don't think there is an intention to whitewash. And like I said, if there is corruption in the judiciary, and to some extent there is, at different levels, it could be in the registry, it could be among judges, So, if you say that, fine, it's not going to erode the faith of the people.
What about the court's observation of a deeper conspiracy and this being a calculated move?
I frankly, I don't know where that comes from.
Do you sort of subscribe to this conspiracy, calculated move?
No. I don't think there's any conspiracy. But like I said, maybe they have some information which we don't have.
Calculated move?
No, I don't think so. No.
What do you attribute this to?
Their statement? I don't know. Perhaps I really have no idea why they said that. Anger or something? I don't know.
Anger, ego, you can't touch us?
No. I don't think so. I think judges are above that. Contempt of court, you will find that there have been hundreds and thousands of cases of contempt of court, but very, very rarely has the court taken any action.
Why here? Because if what you're saying...
Yeah, here they have not taken action for contempt of court.
They haven't, but they've taken action which is perhaps worse than contempt of court.
Yeah, which is why I said it is overreach. I'm not defending the judiciary on that. Yeah, it is overreach, and I'm pretty clear about it. That kind of action should not have been taken.
You know, in the past, chapters on corruption in bureaucracy, in governance, and also in the political spectrum have been included in textbooks. So, why not the judiciary? And don't you think that cracking the whip on this is completely and unforgivably partisan and subjective?
If there is corruption in the judiciary, and there is to some extent, at different levels, it can be mentioned, but needs to be qualified.
So, qualified, since they quoted a former Chief Justice saying that there is corruption in the judiciary. So, somehow this statement was backed by whatever, if you want to use the word, evidence.
Correct. But the former Chief Justice did not use it in the context that there is, everybody is corrupt in the judiciary. That's not the context in which he said, So, to take something out of context and put it over here and give the impression, like I said, you have to see the whole thing. You have to see pendency, you have to see vacancies, and you have to see corruption.
But the chapter does talk about those.
It does.
does.
Yeah, it
So,
does. Yeah.
The word everybody is corrupt in the judiciary, corruption is all pervasive, is something which is being attributed to a content which does not state this explicitly.
It does. It need not. It need not.
Yeah.
When you say something, what is the impression
You
that you're
say
giving?
a challenge is corruption in the judiciary.
A challenge in the context of what? A challenge in the context of something which is all pervasive. Two instances which are all pervasive. When you give a third instance, you are saying it's like those two.
Which is backed by what a former Chief Justice has said.
Again, the context is important.
You know, last month, in response to a starred question in Parliament, it was stated by the Law Minister that 8,630 complaints were received in the office of the Chief Justice of India against sitting judges during the last 10 years. So, they were issues of corruption which have come up and which have also, in one sense, been substantiated. So, why is the Supreme Court really so sensitive about any kind of discussion on this or any mention, in this case, or mention?
I don't think there's a problem on that, in the sense that there may be 8,000 complaints, but what is the nature of the complaints? Numbers doesn't mean anything. So, supposing somebody loses a case, all right, and says that, I lost the case because the judge is corrupt, or I lost the case because the judge is biased. A sweeping statement of that nature, not backed by anything, would that be treated as a complaint, which should be looked into? You have to appreciate that everybody does not succeed in litigation. There are people who lose in litigation. 50% of the cases are decided in favor of one party, 50% are decided in favor of the opposite party. Now, if all those persons against whom a case is decided, they make complaints saying bias, corruption, money, this, that, and the other, it will never end. I mean, 8,000 is nothing. You will probably get 10 million cases like that, right? So, the nature of complaints is important. Now, were any of them serious? Were any of them backed by any material, or were they just frivolous? That is what is to be seen. And if they were serious, how were they dealt with? That is also important.
But the Supreme Court cracking the whip, and in this case it has cracked the whip, and where you agree probably it should not have, gives the impression, and again when we are saying impression, it's in context, that uncomfortable issues of the judiciary seem to be being brushed under the carpet, and somewhere the custodians or the guardians seem to be choking that system.
I'm not sure about that. I can't recall any instance other than this where the Supreme Court has taken offense at something having been said. Two of them I can recall. One was when a contempt of court was initiated against Mr. Prashant Bhushan. All right. He had apparently said something which the court did not agree with. There was also an instance, I think, when Arundhati Roy said something. There was also an instance when a former judge of the Supreme Court, Justice Katyu, said something, right? So these are three instances spread over a couple of years, all right? But then on a daily basis, you hear criticism of judgments being delivered by the Supreme Court. Even I have criticized judgments delivered by the
Like you're
Supreme Court.
criticizing this one.
Yeah, so that doesn't mean anything, I mean, what does it mean? And the court has not taken any action, by the way. So what does it mean? Does it mean that the court is, being sensitive? They're accepting the criticism. And I think Chief Justices have said that, yeah, you're free to criticize, but criticize in a manner which is rational.
Coming back to the textbooks, why isn't the same logic being used when criticism of corruption in bureaucracy and governance and in the political spectrum, when that is mentioned, then the same yardstick should be used? There is somehow the impression that there is oversensitivity when it comes to the judiciary. And because the courts have that upper hand, if I may use the term, they just crack the whip. While for the others or other segments, which is bureaucracy, governance, politicians, all these mentions made in the past in chapters have gone unheeded.
Yeah.
So how fair is that?
I don't know about the other situations, so really I can't comment. Coming back to the issue of oversensitiveness, well, there are occasions, when the court has pulled up officers or pulled up lawyers or pulled up litigants, okay? That is not necessarily being oversensitive. That perhaps, depending upon the situation and depending upon what happened, is telling that officer or that litigant or that lawyer that, listen, you're going pretty close to the Lakshman Rekha. The courts, in that sense, I don't think are oversensitive. Sensitive, yes. When you cross the Lakshman Rekha, that's when contempt comes in. But when you're about to cross the Lakshman Rekha,
You're warned.
you're warned. That's being sensitive. You may call it being oversensitive, but then that's a sort of a caution that, listen, you're going a little too far.
Moving away from this particular case and particular controversy, at the macro level, what is your take about corruption in the judiciary? And would you agree with the former Chief Justice who said there is corruption in the judiciary?
Okay. I think we need to go back about maybe 25 years. Another former Chief Justice of India, soon after retirement, he said something to the effect that 20% of the judiciary is corrupt or something to that effect. Now, when you talk about the judiciary, you don't talk only about the judges. The judiciary comprises the judges, it comprises the registry or the staff. Now, when you say that 20% of the judiciary is corrupt, you could perhaps pick up some judges, but you could certainly pick up some people from the registry. Now, there is corruption in the registry, perhaps in far greater numbers than one would like to admit. For example, when a case is adjourned and a fresh date is given by the judge, the litigant, who may not be familiar with what is happening, wants to find out what has happened. Has the case been adjourned? Why has it been adjourned? What has the judge said? So he goes to some officer in the registry, probably the court master, and the court master says, you give me 50 rupees, 100 rupees, and I will tell you.
Is that the going rate?
I don't know what the going rate is. I am out of all this now. Getting a medical certificate when I was in college, the going rate was 5 rupees. So when you talk about these instances, you talk about corruption. In the judiciary, that is at the registry level. You also have, and I think there was a case recently where a lawyer told his client that, listen, give me so much of money because I have to pass on some to the judge. Okay. Was there any truth in it? I don't know. But then that gives the impression that, this judge is corrupt. So these kind of things happen and we can't shut our eyes to it.
It isn't saying that these happen taking the issue and the malaise very lightly.
Yes, I was coming to that before you interrupted me. Now, one is acknowledgement that these things happen. What is the solution? How do you check it? Right? You go to the Bar Council and say that, listen, this is the complaint that I have received, look into it. How many complaints has the Bar Council of India received?
I'm interrupting you yet again,
Yeah.
with your permission. Complaints stop when evil practice or ill practice is rampant.
Correct.
So, probably if they have not received it, it means it's the done thing. And this is the norm.
Yeah, I don't know. That's when you're dealing with lawyers who promote, for use of a better word, the impression of corruption. What about litigants? When a litigant tells somebody that, listen, I think that judge is corrupt, right? And why do I say he's corrupt? Because the lawyer told me he's corrupt. So these are problems that the justice system, if I may say so, faces from lawyers and litigants. I'm not saying it happens every day. I'm not saying it happens hundreds of times, but there are instances of this happening. The third aspect is the judges themselves or the registry. Okay. Now, if the registry is corrupt and there is a complaint, action must be taken. But again, it's like a crime. You sentence a person for a crime, but that doesn't mean nobody else is going to commit that crime.
Exactly. And also, a person who's in court, a litigant, he is fighting his cases. He's not going to take on even a clerk because as it is.
Right.
So, so this question of how many complaints have come, what are the numbers, all that is actually academic.
Yes, you're right. You're right. That's why I said this, 8,000 complaints being received is irrelevant. The point is that it has to be stopped. Even if it is one case, it has to be stopped. Allegations of corruption against judges, a mechanism exists. How efficient is it? Is again a matter of opinion. Now, there is criticism to the process that judges may have to go through to face allegations of corruption, which is impeachment.
I was going to come to one of the cases, but okay.
Okay, so you have a process of impeachment. Is the process cumbersome? There is talk that yes, it is cumbersome. Does it reach conclusion? In the cases that we've had so far, it does not reach conclusion.
There is a case of impeachment which is still pending at the present moment. So, how can we then make a sweeping statement or this impression what we are talking about, that the judiciary is clean? There have been cases of impeachment.
Yeah.
So, to say that the judiciary is clean and corruption is not all pervasive, may not be all pervasive, but is there.
Yeah. I'm not saying no. There are instances of corruption. Like I said, there were some impeachment motions. There is one which is pending just now.
And where stacks of cash was found.
Let's not go into the merits of this particular case. But yes, is it progressing fast enough? It is possible that the time frame could be reduced. So, but you have a mechanism. Now, you can fault the mechanism.
Would you fault it? And would you say?
I would say yes. The speed must be much greater than what it is at the moment. It must be much faster.
Or a different process?
I'm not sure. There could be a different process. I don't know. I haven't given it a thought. But certainly, the existing process can be speeded up. I have no doubt about that. You can't keep the whole thing pending for months together.
Caesar's wife must not only be above suspicion, but also appear, and I underline the word appear, to be above suspicion. Don't you think on this count, the judiciary has fallen short vis-a-vis corruption?
Again, as a blanket statement or as a sweeping statement, no. But yes, there are instances of corruption within the judiciary. There have been transfers of some judges because of suspicions of misconduct, if I may use that expression. May not necessarily be corruption, but misconduct. Yeah, so that does give the impression that all is not well.
And is all not well?
I think all is well, but yes, there are some challenges, which need to be looked into. I think time had come a little earlier, much earlier actually. The time has come for the judiciary to introspect. Let all the judges in the Supreme Court sit down, discuss this threadbare. What is happening?
So, in one sense, this chapter, which is being targeted, has been, if I may use the word, and you're going to not accept it, but a blessing that it has brought this, the alleged corruption in the judiciary, back into focus.
Yes, it has. It has, yes. I mean, it was always in the focus in the sense that, impeachment motions were going on. So it was always in the focus. But it's like kind of resurfaced, if, one can say that.
Blessing in disguise?
I'm not sure if it's a blessing in disguise because, like I said, I have been feeling for a long time, not now, that the judges have to introspect. Introspection is absolutely necessary.
Do you feel that there is willingness for this, or do you feel there is an attempt to brush all these uncomfortable issues under the carpet and say all is well?
I'm not sure if there is a feeling that let's brush everything under the carpet. I don't get that feeling.
Is there concern or a feeling that this must be addressed and it must be addressed now?
Well, if there is a feeling, good. If there is no feeling, that feeling should come. You can't get over the fact that cases are pending. Now it is something like 55 million. You can't get over the fact that cases are pending for years together, sometimes decades.
So, in the same strain, you can't get over the fact that there is corruption in the judiciary.
Yeah.
Do you think that the courts and the judges are willing to address the corruption? Or they say, forget it, let's talk, because there's a lot of talk about vacancies, there is a lot of talk about backlog of cases, all that is there. All that is in public domain, they're willing to discuss it, they talk about it. Corruption in judiciary is not even mentioned.
Yeah, but they should. They should mention it. They should discuss it. That's what I said, that when you're talking about introspection, this could be one of the topics.
Could or should?
Should.
Top priority?
Top priority, yes.
How much does politics and government and after retirement SOPs contribute to the alleged corruption within the judiciary?
Well, there is talk, certainly, that if you give judgments in favor of the government, you are likely to be rewarded. Okay? Now, it could be a coincidence in some cases. It could be planned and not a coincidence. You have a judge who delivered a particular judgment and is appointed the governor of a state. Is that a coincidence? Maybe yes, maybe no. You have a chief justice who gave a judgment in favor of the government and was nominated to the Rajya Sabha. Is that a coincidence or is that not a coincidence? I don't know. Okay? Now, there are some instances where you need to have a retired judge to hold that particular position. In those cases, it could be just a coincidence. For example, you have the Central Administrative Tribunal. You need to have a retired Chief Justice as the chairperson of the tribunal. Fine, just because somebody has given a judgment in favor of the government doesn't mean he's been appointed over there. It could mean, but it could also not mean. You have the National Human Rights Commission. You have to, the law requires a retired judge of the Supreme Court. So you appoint somebody, he could have given a judgment in favor of the government prior to his retirement, he could not have given a judgment. One doesn't know. So it could be a coincidence, it could not be a coincidence. It's not that always a person is rewarded. There are instances where persons may not be rewarded.
There are instances where government accommodation was kept for a long time in hope of the reward which did not come.
No, it did come in some sense because that person has got a lifetime, apparently, a lifetime government accommodation. Why did that happen? You put 2 and 2 together, you might get 4. Sometimes you put 2 and 2 together, you might get 5. But to say that
it's all pervasive is not true.
Is not true. In some cases, yes, it is true. Right? It's too much of a coincidence to say that it's not planned.
So, what is the way forward? Be it corruption, be it Caesar's wife appearing to be above suspicion, and these SOPs we are talking about. What is the way forward?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult question to answer. One suggestion that has been given is that there must be a cooling off period. Okay, 2 years cooling off period. But after 2 years, what happens? You can still do the same thing. Is 2 years enough? What about 5 years? Again, after 5 years also, the same thing may happen. So, I'm not sure whether a cooling off period may necessarily be the right thing. Another suggestion given is that, these positions, like I said, Central Administrative Tribunal or National Human Rights Commission, the law should be changed and judges should not be appointed to those. All right, whom do you appoint? Do you appoint a secretary to the government of India? The same allegation will be made that you took decisions or framed policy in such a manner so that you could get some post after your retirement. So therefore, let's not have secretaries being appointed. That's why I say it's very difficult to answer this question. Some say that the age of retirement should be increased from 65, make it 70. But then after 70, can you say that a person should not be appointed?
What would you say?
I don't know what I would say because it's a problem which I think has to be discussed at all levels. The government has to run, but you have to realize that it's the government that makes the appointments. Why is the government making the appointments? Why did the government appoint a former Chief Justice to the Rajya Sabha? Why did the government appoint a former judge as a governor of a state? That's a question which the government can answer. The judiciary can't answer. Judges can't answer. Why did judges give a particular judgment? They've given reasons. You may agree, you may not agree.
So what is the way forward?
I really can't say. It's a very, very, very difficult question to answer. A lot depends, as Dr. Ambedkar said in the Constituent Assembly and Dr. Rajendra Prasad said in the Constituent Assembly, it depends upon the people. So, the people meaning the leaders, which could be the leaders from the political class, it could be the leaders from the judicial class, it could be the leaders from the executive. It depends upon them. They have to figure it out. I don't think I can give any solution to this because, like I said, it's a very complex problem which involves the government, it involves the executive, it involves the legislature, it involves the judiciary.
Justice Lokur, thank you very much. Thank you for being here with us and thank you for your time and taking us through this complex problem of corruption in the judiciary, and let me say alleged corruption in the judiciary before I'm hauled up.
Thank you. Thank you.